I think my colleagues failed to do so earlier, but on behalf of our group, I want to thank all the staff, the ushers, the cleaners, the porters, the canteen workers, those who serve us through the officials and the staff throughout for their helpful, hard-working and good-humoured approach to us all year, and I wish them and their families the very best for Christmas and indeed for the new year. Minister, a number of things strike me about the Government's transition statement, and it really has the hallmarks of a box-ticking exercise in its list of achievements and aspirations, as though you cut and pasted from the Climate Action Plan and various PR issues that you've done over the last year. But what's actually missing from it is, of course, an honest assessment of what has happened, what will happen and what hasn't happened, both here and globally. An honest assessment of the Government Climate Action Plan would have noted that last year, at the behest of the fossil fuel lobby, every trick in the book was used to stop the Climate Emergency Measures Bill, a bill that articulated one demand of the global movement and the global movement's key demand, and that is to keep fossil fuels in the ground. Stripped of the spin, the underhanded trickery to stop the Climate Emergency Measures Bill was absolutely astounding. And belatedly giving in to the demand of the movement and the school strikers, you're claiming to ban oil exploration, but not gas exploration. And of course, we discover in the detail that there are a plethora of licences out there that will remain good, and in some cases until 2035. While no one seriously believes that it's possible to ban exploration for one fossil fuel and not another. And instead of taking the measures needed, this government sabotaged that bill and sabotaged democracy to signal to industry that Ireland would not step on their toes. At the same time, you also made it clear that Ireland are happy to become a major hub for one of the most damaging and dangerous fossil fuels, fracked gas. A complete refusal to understand the science yet again. Ignore the evidence that the plans of companies who want to build LNG terminals revolve around fracked gas, an industry that is responsible for a huge spike in global methane emissions. And all this time, the government has relied on a false narrative that gas is a safe transitional fuel. It's not. The science is clear, and holding out the idea that it's the lesser evil for climate is actually a death sentence for large parts of our world. In general terms, the problem that confronts the global movement is not that we've got loads of outright climate deniers. We don't. Most people in power and in the ruling elites accept the science and make noise toward the need to cut emissions. But as we saw with this government's record and with COP25 in Madrid recently, formal acceptance of the science is meeting an utter inability to take the steps that are needed both at home and globally. We see almost a religious faith being placed in market mechanisms and new technology that may be achieved at some stage in the future, maybe tomorrow, next year, 10 years' time, maybe by 2050. In the meantime, we're planning for fracked gas terminals and continued exploration for 1 million electric vehicles on our roads, and we hope, like children playing with stones on a beach while ignoring the ocean beside them, that the warning of the science and nature are wrong. This is utter ridiculous faith in a market mechanism, and it is totally misplaced. COP ended in failure not because of the wrangles between one group of nations and another group, or because of squabbles over old carbon credits. It failed because the only attempt to deal with the threat posed by climate change has been to rely on finding some way to ensure that someone can make a profit from it. One commentator noted that the proposals from some countries allowing for massive loopholes that would deliver reduced emissions on paper but nothing in reality. And that's exactly how carbon markets work. Their chief purpose is not to reduce emissions, but to allow for the continued use of oil, coal and gas. And the so-called Clean Development Mechanism, the CDM, has been a fraud on the developing world and on the global environment. It lacks basic social and environmental safeguards and has led to human rights violations as well as environmental destruction. And like the various carbon markets, it has facilitated double counting, where theoretical emission reductions can cheat the accountant, but it cannot cheat the atmosphere and it cannot cheat nature. Offsetting emissions will do nothing to stop climate crisis and will only shift pollution from one place to another. guaranteeing only that someone makes a profit on the way. While countries would reach their climate target on papers, emissions keep rising. The full failure of carbon markets, which remain the only mechanism envisaged at COP and globally, is catastrophic for our planet. We've seen over 30 years of these market and trading permits. During that time, a continued rise in CO2 emissions to historic levels not witnessed in 3 million years. I'm certain, unfortunately, that we'll continue to see the same pattern repeated, and that the demands of the movement will be ignored, and that profit will be the priority over planet or people. But in 2020, and with certain urgency and determination, the global and local movement has to return to the streets, and I look forward to joining them throughout 2020 to get the radical action that we need to save our planet, our biodiversity and our people from catastrophic climate change.
Thank you very much, Deputy Smith. Now